Welcome back, fellow dreamer. Today, we embark on a journey through blood-soaked halls and forgotten fortresses, through the twisted history of the Witcher schools that time forgot. While most know of Kaer Morhen and the legendary School of the Wolf, the schools that produced Geralt of Rivia and his brothers, there exist other orders, schools born from betrayal, forged in violence, and ultimately consumed by the very darkness they were meant to fight. These are the lost schools, the School of the Cat, with its twisted mutations and reputation for assassination, the School of the Viper, whose members became kingslayers in service to Empire, and the forgotten orders that have faded into legend, the School of the Bear, the School of the Griffin, the School of the Manticore, and the mysterious School of the Crane. This is not simply a tale of different training methods or varying philosophies. This is a story of how the noblest intentions can curdle into something monstrous, how the line between monster and monster hunter grows thin when survival demands compromise, and how the sins of the past echo through generations. We will explore the Order of Witches, the unified brotherhood that preceded all the schools, and witness how infighting, ambition, and betrayal shattered that unity into fractured splinter groups. We will delve into the Cat School's horrifying mutation experiments that created emotionally unstable killers, the Viper School's secret library dedicated to defeating the Wild Hunt, and the tragic fates that befell each of these once proud institutions. The Witcher schools represent more than simple training facilities. They embody different philosophies about what it means to be a Witcher, about neutrality and politics, about the value of human life versus monster life, about the costs one is willing to pay for power. Some schools maintain the knightly ideals of the original order, striving to be heroes worthy of respect. Others abandoned all pretense of morality, becoming assassins and mercenaries who killed humans as readily as monsters. And still others walked the narrow path between, trying to preserve some sense of honor in a world that showed them none. Over the next 2 hours, we will uncover the complete history of these lost schools. We will meet Gezraz of Leda, the half-elf who survived vivisection, to lead a rebellion against his tormentors. We will walk alongside Letho of Gullet, the Kingslayer whose loyalty to his school led him to murder kings. We will explore Stigger Castle, where the Cat School conducted their twisted experiments. We will venture into Gorther Gvad, the hidden fortress of the Vipers in the Tir Tocher Mountains. We will discover why the Bear School fell to mob violence, how the Griffin School's library was destroyed by jealous mages, and what became of the Manticore School in the deserts of Zerrikania. These schools are not simply historical footnotes in the Witcher saga. They are windows into the broader question of what happens when superhuman warriors are created to fight monsters, but then find themselves in a world where monsters grow scarce and humans grow fearful. They show us the consequences when the mutation process goes wrong, when politics infect what should be neutral monster hunters, when desperation drives witchers to accept any contract for any price. The Lost Schools are cautionary tales, but they are also stories of survival against impossible odds, of individuals trying to maintain their humanity, even as their mutations and training stripped it away. So settle in, light your silver blade, and prepare your mind for the grim truths we are about to uncover. This is the comprehensive history of the lost Witcher schools, where every secret will be revealed, every betrayal examined, and every tragic fate acknowledged. The monsters we hunt may wear many forms, but sometimes the most terrifying monsters are those who wear a witch's medallion. Chapter 1. The Order of Witches. The common origin. Before there were schools, before the continent knew the wolf or the cat or the viper, there was only the Order. The Order of Witches, founded in the 10th century in the halls of Moorgray Castle, deep within the Kestrel Mountains. To understand why the schools fractured, why some witches became noble protectors while others degenerated into assassins and mercenaries, we must first understand where they all came from. We must understand the vision that created the first witches and how that vision was corrupted, abandoned, and ultimately shattered. The story begins, as so many dark tales do, with good intentions and terrible methods. The northern kingdoms, still young and struggling to establish themselves in a world dominated by elder races, faced a crisis. Monsters plagued the countryside, creatures from the conjunction of the spheres, beasts that had crossed over from other realms, hunted humans with impunity. Traditional soldiers proved inadequate against supernatural threats. Conventional weapons barely scratched creatures that could regenerate wounds, survive fatal injuries, or simply overpower the strongest warriors. The kings and nobles demanded a solution from their mages, and the mages, ambitious and ruthless as ever, provided one. The mage responsible for creating the first witches was Alzur, working alongside his master Cosimo Malaspina and fellow mage Idaran of Ulivo. Alzur himself was a fascinating and tragic figure. Found abandoned as an infant on the doorstep of a noble estate near Maribor, with only a note reading, "His mother perished, he is one of yours." Alzur grew up unloved and unwanted. The noble families feared showing him affection, as it might be seen as admitting paternity to a bastard child. Bullied by his siblings for his lowborn status, Alzur retreated into books, particularly tales of chivalry and heroism. He became obsessed with the concept of valor, with proving himself worthy through brave deeds. This obsession led young Alzur to repeatedly intervene in dangerous situations, trying to save travelers from bandits despite having no combat training. Each time, he was beaten nearly to death, until one day, his latent magical abilities manifested violently, leaving 3 would-be bandits as charred corpses. Terrified of their adopted son's power, the family called upon mages to train him. Thus began Alzur's education in the magical arts, an education that would eventually lead him to create monsters and the witches to hunt them. Alzur's motivations were complex. He had befriended a young sorceress named Liliana, who dreamed of ridding the world of monsters to make it safe for humanity's expansion. Together, they experimented with combining human and monster traits, trying to create controllable warriors who could hunt supernatural threats. The experiments went disastrously wrong. A creature they created escaped their laboratory and killed Liliana. Alzur, devastated by her death and haunted by guilt, vowed to fulfill her dream. He would create warriors capable of hunting monsters, no matter the cost. Working with Cosimo and Idaran, Alzur began his terrible work at Risper Castle. They needed test subjects, children whose bodies were malleable enough to survive the mutations. 38 children, girls and boys both, were subjected to the initial experiments. The results were catastrophic. Only 5 boys survived. The girls all died from the process, their bodies unable to withstand the mutations. Even the survivors were disappointing to the mages. While they gained enhanced physical abilities and limited magical capacity, they were far from the superhuman monster hunters the mages had envisioned. The Brotherhood of Sorcerers, disappointed by these results, branded them failures and called them witches, a derogatory term meaning mere witch practitioners, charlatans capable of nothing more than basic witchery. But Alzur, Cosimo, and Idaran refused to abandon their work. Banished from Risberg, they took the 5 surviving witches and relocated to the abandoned Morgrave Castle in the Kestrel Mountains. There, away from the Brotherhood's oversight, they continued their experiments and training. They refined the mutation process, developing what would become known as the Trial of the Grasses, a horrifying ordeal that involved consuming specialized mutagens and surviving the resulting transformations. Most candidates died. Those who survived gained enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, and senses. Their eyes developed the distinctive cat-like pupils that allowed them to see in darkness. They gained resistance to disease and extended lifespans. They also became sterile, forever unable to have children of their own. The witches were trained not just in combat, but in a comprehensive curriculum designed to make them effective monster hunters. Knights and soldiers taught them swordplay, introducing them to both northern and southern fighting styles. The witches developed their own unique combat techniques, incorporating acrobatic movements and lightning-fast strikes that took advantage of their enhanced reflexes. Mages taught them about monsters, compiling bestiaries that detailed the habits, weaknesses, and habitats of various creatures. Alchemists instructed them in potion making, teaching them to brew concoctions that enhanced their abilities or provided resistance to specific threats. One of the witches' instructors left a particularly lasting impression. A knight-errant named Taliesin Bledin Yorath, Eb Llewellyn, whom the witches called Griffin, after the black griffin on his shield, taught them not just swordsmanship, but philosophy. He spoke to them about duty, about serving a higher purpose, about being created for a reason. These lessons resonated deeply with some witches, particularly one named Erland, who would later found the School of the Griffin in honor of his mentor's teachings. The order established itself at Morgrave, and the witches began venturing out on what they called the Path. Each spring, they would leave the castle and travel across the northern kingdoms, taking contracts to hunt monsters. They would return each winter to Morgrave to mourn their fallen brothers and share tales of their adventures. For a time, the system worked. The witches proved effective at hunting monsters, and their reputation grew. They were seen not as freakish mutants, but as necessary protectors, skilled professionals doing dangerous work that no one else could manage. However, Alzur and the other founding mages eventually departed. Alzur's ultimate fate is known. Years later, in the city of Maribor, he attempted to use his spell Alzur's Double Cross to summon a massive creature called a Vey. The monster proved uncontrollable and killed him, destroying half the city before fleeing. With the departure of the mages, the order lost its leadership and direction. Only a handful of mages remained to perform the mutation rituals, and there was no clear authority figure to maintain order among the witches themselves. This leadership vacuum proved disastrous. The witches, spread across the continent, taking contracts, began competing for work. As monsters became scarcer due to their own success, contracts became more valuable and more contested. Witches started tricking each other out of jobs, threatening rivals, and in some cases resorting to violence. The brotherhood that had once united them began to fracture. Different witches developed different philosophies about their profession. Some believed in maintaining the knightly ideals they had been taught, in serving as noble protectors who helped humanity. Others grew cynical, viewing themselves as professional monster hunters owed payment for services rendered, nothing more. Still others became bitter, angry at a world that feared and despised them despite their service. The final fracture came from a witcher named Arnegad. Big, burly, and temperamental, Arnegad got into a dispute with another witcher named Rhys over a contract to hunt a chort. The disagreement escalated until Arnegad attacked Rhys, nearly killing him. Arnegad knew that the other witches would seek vengeance for this attack on one of their own. So he returned to Morgrave with a group of loyal followers, intending to seize control of the Order or destroy it. A battle erupted within Morgrave's halls. Witcher against witcher, brother against brother. The Order ultimately prevailed, but at terrible cost. Many witches died in the fighting. Arnegad and his surviving followers were forced to flee. This battle marked the end of the United Order of Witches. Arnegad and his group traveled to the Amel Mountains, where they founded the School of the Bear. Years later, a faction within the Bear School would betray their founder and split off to form the School of the Viper. Meanwhile, back at Morgrave, the remaining witches found themselves increasingly divided. Some believed they could improve upon the mutation process and the Order's methods. A group of 15 to 20 young witches, believing they knew better, left Morgrave in the dead of night, stealing mutagenic compounds and alchemical tools. They would establish the School of the Cat at Stigger Castle. Another group, led by a witcher named Erland of Larvik, refused to let the knightly ideals of the original Order die. Erland had been deeply moved by Griffin's teachings about duty and honor. When his brother Rhys, the same Rhys whom Arnegad had nearly killed, was gravely wounded, Erland knew the Order was doomed. He gathered 13 close friends and allies, and they departed Morgrave peacefully. They traveled east to Caer Seren, a fortress that had once housed Alzur and his fellow mages during their early experiments. The place was haunted by the spirits of failed experimental subjects and dead witches. Erland and his companions fought and vanquished these spirits, then established the School of the Griffin, dedicated to preserving the original ideals of the witcher profession. The last group to leave Morgrave consisted of the remaining members of the original Order, those who simply wanted to do their jobs as professional monster hunters without getting involved in politics or philosophy. Led by a witcher named Deglan, with Barmin as his second-in-command, this final group traveled north to the valley of Caer Morhen in Cadwyn. There they founded the School of the Wolf, creating wolf-shaped medallions for themselves and officially ending the original Order of Witches. The time that followed, when multiple witcher schools operated independently across the continent, would be remembered as the Golden Age of Witches. But this Golden Age would not last. The schools, lacking the unity and shared purpose of the original Order, would each follow their own path. Some would maintain honor and discipline. Others would descend into moral compromise and outright criminality, and all of them ultimately would face persecution and decline as the very success of their monster hunting made them seem less necessary and more threatening to a fearful population. The Order of Witches had been born from dark experiments and desperate necessity. Its successor schools would inherit both its power and its curse. Chapter 2: School of the Cat, born from rebellion. Of all the Witcher schools, none carries a darker reputation than the School of the Cat. Even among other witches, who are themselves feared and despised by much of society, the cats are considered pariahs. They are known as assassins, mercenaries, and killers who use their steel swords more often than silver, who take contracts on humans as readily as monsters. But the School of the Cat's infamy is not simply the result of moral flexibility or pragmatic survival. It is the consequence of horrifying mutation experiments that went catastrophically wrong, creating witches whose emotions were not dulled but amplified, leaving them prone to violent mood swings and erratic behavior. The early history of the Cat School begins with ambition and arrogance. Among the young members of the Order of Witches at Morgreg, there existed a group who believed they could do better than their elders. They looked at the mutation process and saw room for improvement. They examined the witches' code and found it wanting. They believed that witches should accept any contract, including assassinations of humans, arguing that such flexibility would make them more valuable and ensure their survival in a changing world. They believed they could create truly emotionless witches, perfect killing machines untroubled by doubt or hesitation. Between 15 and 20 of these young witches, following the chaos caused by Arnegad's violence and the subsequent formation of the Bear School, decided to take matters into their own hands. They left Morgreg by night, stealing a significant collection of mutagenic compounds and alchemical tools. Some sources suggest they were already using the symbol of the cat at this time, having adopted it before their departure. They traveled south, far from the northern kingdoms, to the kingdom of Ebbing. There, in a remote mountain chain, they discovered Stigger Castle, a citadel that would become their headquarters and ultimately the site of their greatest crimes. The founder and first leader of this early cat school was a witcher named Kodan, described as a half-elf. Kodan believed deeply in the principles that had driven the group to split from the order. Witches should not limit themselves to monster hunting. They should offer their services as spies, mercenaries, and assassins. By making themselves indispensable to local rulers, they could ensure their school's survival and prosperity. To win favor with the nobility and common folk of Ebbing, the new School of the Cat offered exactly these services. They hunted monsters, yes, but they also dealt with bandits, carried out political assassinations, and served as intelligence gatherers for various noble houses. This strategy initially proved successful. The School of the Cat gained the respect of both the local peasantry and the nobility. The people of the Pereplut Bogs, even centuries later, would remember witches fondly, not just for slaying monsters, but for eliminating dangerous criminals. The cat school's reputation grew, and they attracted new students. Unlike other witcher schools, which accepted only human males, the cats were willing to train anyone who could survive the trials. Human females, elves, half-elves, and other non-pure-blooded humans were all potential candidates. This openness would later become one of the school's defining characteristics. But within Steiger Castle's halls, the mages working with the cat school pursued an obsession. They wanted to create the perfect witcher, one whose emotions were completely eliminated. The first generation of cats they created at Steiger was successfully stripped of most emotional responses. These witches appeared almost alien compared to other witches, showing no fear, no joy, no anger, nothing but cold professional detachment. To the mages, this seemed like success, but they wanted to go further. They believed they could refine the process, creating an even more complete emotional void. The mages developed a new mutation formula, modifications to the trial of the grasses, designed to suppress emotions even more thoroughly than before. They were given free rein by the school's masters to perfect their process. What happened next represents one of the darkest chapters in Witcher history. The new formula did not work as intended. Instead of dulling emotions further, it amplified them catastrophically. Would-be witches who underwent these modified mutations emerged as emotionally volatile, prone to violent mood swings, capable of sudden rage or despair. They were psychologically unstable, dangerous even to their own comrades. The mages, rather than acknowledging their failure and attempting to help these damaged students, made a monstrous decision. They caged this failed batch of witches, labeling them defective products. They conducted further experiments on these imprisoned students, including vivisections performed on living subjects, all in an attempt to understand what had gone wrong and derive a solution. The witches were treated not as people, but as experimental materials, cut open and studied while still alive, their screams echoing through Steiger's dungeons. Among these tortured test subjects was a half-elf named Gezras. Born in 1046, Gezras had endured a childhood of cruelty and hatred. His foster father despised him, viewing him as an abomination and a living reminder of his mother's betrayal. At a very young age, Gezras was sold to the mages of Steiger Castle to become a witcher. His training progressed relatively normally until he was selected as a test subject for the new mutation formula. The process left him emotionally unstable and unhinged, and when the mages decided to dissect the failures to understand their mistakes, Gezras found himself thrown into a pile of corpses, presumed dead after preliminary experiments. But Gezras survived. Waking among the dead and dying, barely alive himself, he managed to crawl from the pile of discarded bodies. He found the other imprisoned witches, those who had not yet been killed by the mages' experiments, and freed them. Together, this group of damaged, emotionally scarred witches escaped from Steiger Castle into the night. They had nowhere to go, no resources, and they were hunted by the mages who wanted to eliminate their failed experiments before word of the atrocities spread. Salvation came from an unexpected source. A group of Airnsider elves who still resisted human domination discovered the escaped witches and offered them sanctuary. The elves provided shelter, healing, and protection from those who hunted them. In exchange, Gezras and his followers agreed to support the elves in their guerrilla war against human expansion. This alliance would have far-reaching consequences for the cat school's reputation. Witches, who were supposed to maintain neutrality, were now actively fighting on the side of elves against humans. Cat assassins working for elven causes became legendary, their exploits spreading throughout the northern kingdoms and bringing unwanted attention from royal courts. Meanwhile, back at Stigger Castle, the old cat school continued operating. The original founder Kodan and the other early cats, unaware of the full extent of the Mage's crimes, continued training new witches and taking contracts. But their reputation was being poisoned by the actions of Gezras's group. Kings and queens, hearing reports of witcher assassins working for elven rebels, grew fearful. They did not distinguish between the old cats at Stigger and Gezras's splinter group. To them, the School of the Cat had become a threat, politically active witches who could not be controlled or trusted. Gezras and his followers, having grown in strength and numbers with the elves' support, never forgot what had been done to them. The young witches plotted revenge against the mages who had tortured them. Years after their escape, they infiltrated Stigger Castle under cover of darkness. Moving through the fortress they had once called home, they found the mages sleeping in their chambers. Gezras and his band slaughtered them all, cutting their throats as they slept, ensuring that none of the sorcerers who had committed such atrocities would ever harm another student. However, in their rage and desire for vengeance, the infiltrators also killed Kodan, the school's original founder and grandmaster. According to some accounts, Kodan was murdered by one of the emotionally unstable young witches named Tries, who hated the grandmaster for his harsh and allegedly abusive training methods. Gezras's group had not intended to kill Kodan. Their attack was focused on the mages, but the emotionally volatile nature of the escaped witches meant that violence could erupt unpredictably. In an ironic twist, Kodan would later be remembered as the first witcher to die in his bed, murdered while sleeping, rather than falling in combat. After completing their revenge and departing Stigger, the old cat witches, those who had remained loyal to Kodan and who had not participated in the mutiny, found themselves alone and vulnerable. The mages who had performed their mutations were dead. Their founder was dead, and royal armies, having been planning an assault on Stigger due to the school's political activities, were now marching on the castle. The siege lasted 3 brutal days. Every defending witcher fought to the death, knowing that surrender meant execution. When the assault finally ended, no cat witches remained alive within Stigger's walls. But the School of the Cat did not die at Stigger. Gezras and his followers, having satisfied their thirst for vengeance, moved north into the northern kingdoms. They knew they could not establish a permanent fortress. The kings would simply attack it again. Instead, Gezras decided that the new School of the Cat should be mobile. They acquired or constructed a large caravan named Din Marv, which means dead man in some languages. This traveling headquarters allowed them to move constantly, never staying in one place long enough for authorities to organize against them. They established hidden camps throughout the northern kingdoms, places where they could perform mutations and train new students before moving on. The Din Marv cats, as they became known, rejected the heritage of the Stygian founders. They saw their true beginning as Gezras's escape from the torturous mages. Under Gezras's leadership, they bolstered their ranks by accepting renegades, outcasts, and badly mutated witches rejected by other schools. The School of the Cat became a refuge for those who had nowhere else to go. And this openness extended to accepting female students and non-human candidates. They were unique among witcher schools in training women as witches, using mutation formulas they had stolen from Stigger during their revenge infiltration. However, the corruption in their mutations remained. The formula that had amplified emotions rather than dulling them became the standard for the mobile cat school. New generations of cat witches were created with this flawed process, each one prone to emotional instability, mood swings, and violent outbursts. Some cats were functional, able to control their emotional volatility and work as skilled monster hunters. Others became genuinely dangerous, unpredictable killers whose mental state could shift from calm to homicidal rage without warning. The Dinmarv cats also adopted Kodan's original philosophy about accepting any contract. They sold their skills to anyone who could pay, for any job. Monster hunting, banditry suppression, espionage, assassination, nothing was off the table. This moral flexibility, combined with their emotional instability and alliance with elven rebels, created a reputation that would follow the cat school for centuries. Other witches viewed them with suspicion and contempt. The general populace feared them. Even other monster hunters, who themselves faced discrimination and hatred, considered the cats to be dishonorable mercenaries who had abandoned the witch's code. Gezras himself led the mobile cat school with dedication and fierce loyalty to his followers. He maintained his alliance with the Aen Seder, famously saying he would take a contract from an Aen Seder over Eldwan any day, using the elven word for humans. This preference for working with elves over humans was common among cat witches, many of whom were themselves part elven or had been rescued by elves as Gezras had been. In the 10,060s, Gezras and his cats played a significant role in Ailuren's rebellion against human rule, with the Dinmarv caravan serving as a war transport for elven forces. Gezras, who was romantically involved with Ailuren, fought alongside the elven rebels in what would prove to be their final, tragic battle. Gezras died in that battle, his dream of helping the elves resist human dominion dying with him. The School of the Cat fell into a turbulent period of leadership transitions until a new Grandmaster named Trice, possibly the same Trice who had killed Kodan, took control. Under Trice and later Grandmasters, the Cat School continued its nomadic existence, training new witches in secret camps and taking contracts across the continent. Chapter 3. The Cat School's Dark Evolution. The School of the Cat story did not end with Gezras' death. Over the following centuries, the mobile school continued operating out of the Dinmarv caravan, but their reputation grew ever darker. The emotional instability inherent in their mutations, combined with their willingness to kill humans for money, created a school of witches who were feared and reviled even by their own kind. Yet the cats persisted, adapting and surviving in a world that wanted them dead. In the late 12th century, an unexpected development occurred. The Dinmarv caravan settled temporarily near Herch, close to the summer camp of the School of the Wolf. For some time, both the cat and wolf schools were funded by Caedwenian monarchs, and student exchanges took place between them. Some older witches from the two schools even formed friendships despite their very different philosophies. The Wolf School maintained strict neutrality and professional standards. The Cat School accepted assassination contracts and political work. Yet for a brief period, it seemed possible that the two schools might learn from each other, that the cats might be drawn back toward more traditional witcher values. This hope proved tragically misplaced. Within the Cat School, a faction centered around the then leader Trice engaged in a conspiracy against the Wolf School, working with King Radawid, the second's mage Astragarus. Trice and his followers developed a plan to eliminate the Wolf School and seize a monopoly on Witcher contracts in the region. Trice believed that by helping the Caedwenian king destroy the wolves, the cats would be given special status and exclusive rights to work in the kingdom. Other experienced cat school members, such as a witcher named Guxard, had no knowledge of this plot. The conspiracy culminated in disaster at a witcher tournament. The king's men arrested Guxard and other cats who were not part of the plot, ensuring they could not warn the wolves or interfere. Then, at the tournament itself, Trice's faction attacked the Wolf School witches. The wolves, who had been disarmed for the tournament, found themselves ambushed by their supposed comrades. But King Radawid had never intended to honor any agreement with the cats. Once the fighting began, the king's soldiers attacked both schools, attempting to kill all the witches present. The plot had been a trap from the beginning, designed to eliminate witches entirely, rather than elevate one school over another. The massacre at the tournament devastated both schools. Many witches from both the wolf and cat schools died in the fighting. The survivors limped away, their faith in cooperation or political alliances shattered. This betrayal, known as the treachery or Zdrada, would be remembered for generations as one of the darkest moments in Witcher history. It demonstrated that kings could not be trusted, that witches were valued only so long as they remained useful, and that political involvement inevitably led to betrayal and death. For the cat school, the failed conspiracy had severe consequences. Their already poor reputation became abysmal. The Wolf School, which had previously been willing to work alongside cats, despite philosophical differences, now viewed them as treacherous assassins who would betray their own kind for political gain. Other Witcher schools learned of the incident and grew even more wary of the cats. The mobile school found contracts increasingly difficult to obtain, their services unwanted even by desperate communities facing monster threats. The cat witches adapted by doubling down on what made them infamous. If they were going to be viewed as assassins and mercenaries anyway, they would lean into that reputation. The school became even more willing to take contracts on human targets, accepting work as hired killers, spies, and enforcers for anyone who could pay. Some individual cat witches managed to maintain personal codes of honor despite their school's reputation. Others embraced their roles as remorseless killers, their emotional instability manifesting as genuine psychopathy. This high line between functional cat witcher and dangerous murderer grew increasingly blurred. Throughout the 13th century, various cat witches appeared in the historical record, each exemplifying different aspects of the school's degraded state. A cat witcher named Bren was encountered by Geralt of Rivia and displayed the mercurial, unpredictable nature common to his school. The bounty hunter Leo Bonhart slew multiple cat witches and collected their medallions as trophies, displaying the cat-shaped medallions alongside those of other schools he had killed. When Ciri found herself in Stega Castle during the events of the Witcher saga, she claimed a cat school medallion from a fallen witcher. In the 1260s, two cat witches exemplified both the school's potential for honor and its capacity for horror. Christoph of White Orchard was a witcher of the Griffin School, but he became romantically involved with Djabel, a cat witcheress. This relationship between witches of rival schools was highly unusual, suggesting that individual cats were capable of forming genuine emotional connections despite their damaged mutations. Diable herself, however, illustrated the dangers inherent in the cat school's mutation process. Her mental state was highly unstable, likely due to a combination of abuse she had suffered at the hands of her former tutor, a cat witcher named Brian, and the experimental mutation formula used to create female witches. When Leo Bonhard targeted Diable in 1264, Christoph intervened to protect her and was killed by the bounty hunter. Diable survived, but her mental state deteriorated further. Her instability, combined with internal strife within the cat school, contributed to the disastrous events of 1269. That year marked a catastrophic turning point for the Din Marv caravan. While the school was in Sintra, a conspiracy emerged within the cat ranks. Some witches, possibly including Diable in her deteriorated mental state, betrayed the school to Nilfgaardian forces. These traitors had formed an alliance with a Nilfgaardian brigade stationed in Kintra, manipulated by promises of aid and protection. The Nilfgaardian soldiers, however, had no intention of honoring any agreements. They harbored deep hatred for the cat school due to past conflicts, including losses suffered at the Battle of Brenner, where cat witches had fought against Nilfgaard. When the moment came, the Nilfgaardians betrayed the weakened cat witches. They seized the Danmarv caravan by force, killing the witches who defended it. Cat witches named Axel and Cedric died fighting the Nilfgaardian soldiers. Others managed to escape the assault, including witches named Gaetan, Joel, Kasana of Sintra, Pardus of Korath, and Kian. The fall of Din Marv marked the effective end of the organized school of the cat. The surviving witches scattered across the continent, each going their own way. Without their mobile headquarters, they had no way to train new students, no central leadership to coordinate their activities, no shared resources or support network. The School of the Cat effectively ceased to exist as an institution, surviving only as individual witches carrying cat-shaped medallions and bearing the emotional scars of their flawed mutations. These surviving cat witches exemplified the full spectrum of what their school had become. Gaetan, encountered by Geralt in the Blood and Wine expansion, demonstrated both the honorable potential and the violent instability of cat witches. He had been contracted to deal with a Leshen threatening the village of Oniton, but when the villagers refused to pay him and attempted to kill him instead, Gaetan's unstable nature manifested in horrific violence. In a fit of rage, he slaughtered the entire village, men, women, and children, an act of mass murder that would haunt him afterward. When confronted by Geralt, Gaetan expressed genuine remorse for his actions, demonstrating that cat witches retain their capacity for moral judgment even when their emotions drove them to commit atrocities. Kian, another surviving cat witcher, settled in Toussaint and became involved with a young woman from a noble family. Their romance was discovered, and the woman's guardian, furious at the relationship, had Kian tortured and executed. His body was left on display as a warning to other witches who might dare to involve themselves with their betters. The cruelty of Kian's death illustrated the deep hatred that society harbored for cat witches specifically. While all witches faced discrimination, the cats faced active persecution, hunted and killed not for any specific crime, but simply for being what they were. The emotional instability that plagued cat witches stemmed directly from the corrupted mutation formula used at Stigger Castle. Other witcher schools experienced a dulling of emotions during their trials of the grasses. Wolf witches, griffin witches, bear witches all reported that their emotions became muted, less intense, easier to control. This emotional dampening was considered a feature, not a bug, allowing witches to face horrifying monsters without being paralyzed by fear and to endure the discrimination and hatred of society without succumbing to rage or despair. Cat witches, by contrast, experienced emotions with frightening intensity. Joy could become manic euphoria. Sadness could descend into suicidal depression. Anger could explode into homicidal rage. Fear could manifest as paranoid terror. The emotional volatility made it extremely difficult for cat witches to maintain the professional detachment necessary for their work. A contract that went wrong, a peasant who refused payment, an insult from a guardsman. Any of these could trigger violent responses that a witcher from another school would simply endure or ignore. The cat school's willingness to accept female students and non-human candidates, while admirable in its inclusivity, was driven partly by practical necessity. With their reputation making it difficult to recruit students, they could not afford to be selective about who they trained. Any child who survived the initial tests could be subjected to the mutations, regardless of gender or bloodline. The formula used for female witches was even more experimental than the standard cat mutation process, leading to even greater instability in some cases. Yet despite all these problems, despite their terrible reputation and the genuine dangers posed by their unstable members, the cat school produced some witches who were skilled professionals capable of maintaining their honor. These individuals fought against their own nature, consciously working to control their emotional responses and live up to the ideals of the witcher profession. They proved that even the most damaged mutation process could produce heroes if the individual possessed sufficient strength of will and moral character. The legacy of the School of the Cat serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of tampering with the mutation process, about what happens when ambition overrides ethics, about the long-term consequences of short-term decisions. The mages at Stigger Castle had wanted to create perfect emotionless killers. Instead, they created generations of psychologically damaged individuals who struggled daily with impulses they could barely control. The school that had begun with idealistic young witches believing they could improve upon the Order's methods ended with scattered survivors carrying the burden of mutations that made them dangerous to themselves and others. In the years following the fall of Din Marv, rumors occasionally surfaced about cat witches attempting to reorganize. Some tales spoke of a secret enclave where surviving cats trained a new generation using the old formulae. Other stories claimed that a reformed cat school had abandoned assassination work and focused purely on monster hunting, trying to rehabilitate their reputation. But these remained only rumors, unconfirmed by reliable sources. The organized School of the Cat, for all practical purposes, had ended with the loss of their mobile headquarters. The cat medallions themselves became collectors, items, and trophies. Bounty hunters like Leo Bonhart actively sought cat witches to kill, knowing their medallions would fetch high prices from collectors who valued rare artifacts. Some cat witches took to hiding their medallions, pretending to be from other schools or claiming to be mercenaries rather than witches. Others wore their medallions openly, defiantly, daring anyone to challenge them. These different responses reflected the fundamental divide within cat witcher psychology between those who felt shame about their school's reputation and those who embraced it. The question of whether cat witches deserved their dark reputation remains debatable. Certainly, some cats were genuinely monstrous, killers who murdered for pleasure or who lost control of their violent impulses and slaughtered innocents. But others were victims of circumstances beyond their control. Individuals who had been subjected to horrifying mutations as children and spent their lives fighting against psychological damage they never chose. The school's founding principles, accepting any contract and working for anyone who could pay, was morally questionable, but not necessarily evil. Many argued that witches had no obligation to impose their own moral judgments on their clients, that they should simply provide services as requested and let others handle questions of justice and ethics. What cannot be debated is that the School of the Cat story is one of tragedy compounded by tragedy. Young witches seeking to improve their craft became unwitting subjects of torturous experiments. Those experiments created damaged individuals prone to violence. Those damaged individuals formed alliances that brought persecution upon their entire school. That persecution drove them to increasingly desperate measures to survive, and those desperate measures ensure that society would continue to view them as threats rather than protectors. The cycle fed itself, each generation of cat witches inheriting the sins and stigmas of the previous generation, unable to escape the reputation that preceded them. Chapter 4: School of the Viper, Poison and Secrets. In the shadow of the Tir Tocher Mountains, hidden within a fortress called Gortha Gvaed, another lost witcher school pursued its own dark path. The School of the Viper, born from betrayal and nurtured in secrecy, specialized in assassination, espionage, and the use of poisons. Unlike the cats, whose emotional instability made them dangerous and unpredictable, the Vipers were cold, calculating, and disciplined. They were professional killers who served political masters with loyalty that other witches found incomprehensible. Their story is one of hidden agendas, ancient enemies, and ultimate dissolution. The School of the Viper's origins lie in another betrayal within the Witcher Brotherhood. After Arnagad and his followers left Morgrey and established the School of the Bear in the Amel Mountains, they continued the traditions of the original order while adapting to their mountain environment. The Bears developed a reputation as tough, no-nonsense witchers who favored heavy armor and powerful strikes over agility and finesse. They embodied the straightforward, brutal approach to monster hunting, killing creatures through overwhelming force rather than clever tactics. But within the Bear School, not everyone agreed with Arnagad's methods. A faction believed that the school was too rigid, too focused on direct confrontation, when subtlety and cunning could be more effective. This faction studied not just combat techniques, but alchemy, particularly the crafting and use of poisons. They believed that a witcher armed with the right toxins could kill monsters and men alike with minimal risk, slipping poison into food or coating blades with substances that would bring death with a single scratch. The leader of this faction remains unnamed in historical records, but their vision was clear. They wanted to create a school of witches who were as deadly as any bear, but who operated with the subtlety of assassins. They would be spies and intelligence gatherers, infiltrators who could move through society without drawing attention. They would serve political powers directly, working for kings and emperors who could provide resources and protection in exchange for loyal service. This philosophy stood in direct opposition to the traditional Witcher neutrality, but the faction's leaders believed that neutrality was a luxury witches could no longer afford. The split came through careful planning rather than open conflict. The faction that would become the Vipers departed the Bear School quietly, taking with them advanced alchemical knowledge and mutation formulae they had been developing in secret. They traveled south and east, far from the Amel Mountains, into the kingdom of Nilfgaard. There, in the Tir Tocher mountain range, they discovered an ancient fortress that they would transform into their stronghold. They named it Gorthugvaed, which translates to Viper's Pit in Elder speech. The choice to settle in Nilfgaard was strategic. The Empire, already demonstrating the expansionist ambitions that would eventually lead it to conquer much of the known world, needed skilled operatives who could conduct covert operations. The Vipers offered their services to the Nilfgaardian court, becoming imperial witches bound to the crown through oaths of loyalty. In exchange for their service, the Empire provided funding, political protection, and a steady stream of alchemical supplies. The relationship was mutually beneficial. Nilfgaard gained deadly operatives who could eliminate threats both monstrous and human. The Vipers gained the resources and security necessary to establish their school. At Gorthugvaed, the Vipers refined their craft. They developed specialized training techniques focused not just on combat, but on infiltration, disguise, and social manipulation. Viper witches learned to move through crowds without being noticed, to adopt false identities, to gain the trust of targets before striking. They studied languages and customs, making themselves capable of operating anywhere on the continent. They became masters of gathering intelligence, piecing together information from multiple sources to form complete pictures of political situations. But the Vipers' greatest specialty was alchemy, particularly the creation and use of poisons. The school's alchemists developed toxins of incredible potency, substances that could kill with symptoms that mimicked natural disease, poisons that acted slowly enough that the witcher would be long gone before the victim died, venoms that caused agonizing pain or paralysis. Viper witches coated their blades with these substances, turning every scratch into a potentially fatal wound. They learned to slip poisons into food and drink, to apply contact toxins to objects the target would touch, to use powders that could be inhaled to cause unconsciousness or death. The mutation process used by the Viper School, inherited and adapted from the Bear School, emphasized endurance and resistance to toxins. Viper witches could handle substances that would kill normal humans, allowing them to craft poisons without risk of accidental death. Their enhanced senses allowed them to detect poisons by smell, protecting them from assassination attempts by others using similar methods. The mutations also enhanced their already considerable agility, making them swift and difficult to strike in combat. The Vipers adopted snake-themed symbolism for their school. Their medallions depicted vipers coiled to strike. They referred to themselves using snake-related terminology. Their fortress Gortha Gavaid was decorated with serpentine imagery. This symbolism reflected their philosophy that a witcher should strike like a serpent from hiding, delivering venom with precision before retreating to safety. Direct confrontation was to be avoided when possible. Why risk injury fighting a monster head-on when poison could weaken or kill it without danger to the hunter? Within Gortha Gvaid's halls, the Vipers maintained something remarkable, an extensive library dedicated to a single topic, the wild hunt. This spectral cavalry of elven warriors from another sphere had plagued the continent for centuries, appearing during winter to abduct humans for reasons unknown. Most people viewed the wild hunt as unstoppable, a supernatural force that could not be fought or resisted. But the Vipers disagreed. They believed that anything that could be studied could be defeated, and they set out to gather every scrap of information about the hunt that existed. The library at Gortha Gvaid became a repository of knowledge about the NL, the elven race that comprised the wild hunt. The Vipers collected eyewitness accounts from survivors of hunt encounters. They gathered legends and folklore from various cultures. They studied the hunt's patterns, trying to predict when and where they would appear. They researched methods that might make someone immune to the hunt's magic or invisible to their perception. This obsession with understanding the wild hunt suggests that the Vipers had experienced some traumatic encounter with the spectral riders, though the specific incident has been lost to history. The Viper School's relationship with Nilfgaard shaped their development in fundamental ways. Unlike other Witcher schools that maintained independence and took contracts from various clients, the Vipers were bound to a single master. This arrangement ensured stable funding and political protection, but it also meant they could not refuse imperial orders. When Nilfgaard went to war, Viper Witchers went to war with it. When the Empire needed someone assassinated, Vipers carried out the killing. When intelligence needed gathering, Vipers became spies. This close relationship with political power isolated the Vipers from other Witcher schools. The Wolf School, Griffin School, and others maintained the traditional stance of neutrality, refusing to take sides in human conflicts. They viewed the Vipers as having betrayed fundamental Witcher principles by binding themselves to a political master. The Vipers, in turn, viewed other schools as naive, believing that neutrality was an impossible fiction and that witches who claimed to be apolitical were simply serving different masters without admitting it. The Viper School trained relatively few witches compared to larger schools, like the Wolf or Griffin. The specialized nature of their training, combined with the demanding requirements of the mutation process, meant that only exceptional candidates survived to become full Vipers. The school valued quality over quantity, preferring a handful of supremely skilled operatives to a large number of mediocre ones. Each Viper Witcher represented years of intensive training and significant imperial investment. The school's alchemical expertise extended beyond simple poison making. Viper alchemists developed specialized mutagens that enhanced specific abilities relevant to assassination work. Some formulas enhanced a witcher's already keen hearing, allowing them to detect heartbeats through walls or hear whispered conversations from considerable distances. Others improved night vision beyond the already impressive capabilities granted by standard Witcher mutations. Still others enhanced the body's ability to process and neutralize toxins, making vipers even more resistant to poison than other witches. The vipers also pioneered techniques for using witcher signs in non-combat situations. The Axii sign, which could influence minds and bend wills, became a specialty of viper operatives. They developed advanced applications that allowed them to extract information from unwilling subjects to plant suggestions that would surface hours or days later, to create false memories or suppress real ones. These mental manipulation techniques, considered unethical by other witcher schools, were viewed by the vipers as simply another tool in their arsenal. The training regimen at Gotthardkvad emphasized stealth and patience over the aggressive combat training favored by other schools. Young vipers learned to move silently, to control their breathing and heart rate, to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They practiced infiltration techniques, learning to scale walls, pick locks, and disable traps. They studied human behavior and psychology, understanding how to predict reactions and exploit weaknesses. Combat training still occurred, of course, as vipers needed to defend themselves when stealth failed, but it was not the primary focus. The school's isolation in Nilfgaard, far from the northern kingdoms where most witches operated, meant that vipers rarely encountered witches from other schools. When such meetings did occur, they were often tense affairs. Northern witches viewed vipers with suspicion and distaste, seeing them as imperial lapdogs who had sold out their professional independence. Vipers viewed northern witches as hypocrites who pretended neutrality while accepting payment from northern kings and nobles. Both sides believed themselves to be pragmatists, dealing with reality as it existed rather than as they wished it to be. Despite their specialization in assassination, viper witches still hunted monsters when circumstances required it. They were fully trained witches, capable of identifying and killing creatures using the knowledge and techniques common to all schools. Their alchemical expertise made them particularly effective against monsters vulnerable to toxins, as they could craft specialized poisons targeting specific creatures. A viper hunting a vampire might coat his blade with a substance that would weaken the creature's regenerative abilities, turning a difficult fight into a manageable one. The mutation process that created viper witches was notably less physically transformative than some other schools. While they gained enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes like all witches, the changes were subtler. Vipers could pass for normal humans more easily than witches from schools like the bear or cat, whose mutations sometimes produced more obvious physical alterations. This ability to blend in served the Viper's mission as infiltrators and spies, allowing them to operate in places where obvious witches would draw attention. Chapter 5. The Kingslayers and Viper's Fall. The school of the Viper's ultimate fate would be sealed not by outside persecution, but by internal conflict and catastrophic mission failure. In the early 1300s, long after the school's golden age, only a handful of Viper witches remained alive. The school had effectively ceased training new students decades earlier, its mutation masters dead, and its alchemical knowledge scattered. The surviving Vipers continued working as imperial operatives, but they knew their school's days were numbered. These final Vipers would become known as the Kingslayers, and their actions would have consequences that rippled across the entire continent. 3 Viper Witches formed the core of the Kingslayers: Letho of Gullet, Aukes, and Seret. Letho, massive and powerful even by Witcher standards, served as the group's leader. His physical appearance was distinctive: bald, heavily muscled, with the characteristic cat-like eyes of all Witchers, but an unusual intensity that marked him as someone accustomed to command. Aukes was lean and sardonic, skilled in the use of signs and mental manipulation. Seret, the youngest of the 3, combined youthful enthusiasm with deadly competence. Together, they represented the last functional members of their school, brothers bound not just by training, but by shared knowledge that they were the end of a tradition. The Kingslayers served Emperor Emhyr var Emreis of Nilfgaard, who had grand ambitions for continental conquest. Emhyr understood that military might alone would not be sufficient to subdue the northern kingdoms. He needed to destabilize his enemies from within, to create chaos and division that would make conquest easier. The Emperor turned to his loyal Viper Witches with a proposal. If they would eliminate key northern rulers, creating succession crises and political turmoil, Emhyr would reward them by rebuilding their school. He promised funding, resources, and access to the alchemical knowledge necessary to train new Vipers. For Letho and his brothers, this offer represented their school's only hope of survival. The Kingslayers agreed to Emhyr's plan, fully understanding the magnitude of what they were undertaking. They would assassinate kings, violating the most fundamental principle of Witcher neutrality. They would become political operatives in the most brazen way possible, directly interfering in human affairs by removing rulers. They knew that other Witchers would view them as traitors to their profession, that history would remember them as villains. But they were Vipers, trained since childhood to serve their political masters, and more importantly, they believed this was the only way to save their school. The first target was King Demavend III of Iadon. Demavend was a powerful monarch whose kingdom formed a crucial buffer between Nilfgaard and the northern territories. His death would create immediate instability, as Aedirn had no clear heir and multiple factions would compete for power. The Kingslayers infiltrated Demavend's stronghold during the summit at Logmin, where northern rulers had gathered to discuss the ongoing conflicts. On May 1st, 1270, Letho personally killed King Demavend, the Witcher's blade ending the monarch's life, while chaos erupted at the summit. The assassination succeeded beyond expectations. Aedirn descended into civil war as various claimants fought for the throne. The Northern Alliance weakened as kingdoms that had been cooperating began suspecting each other of involvement in the murder. But the Kingslayers' mission was not complete. They had other targets, other monarchs whose deaths would further destabilize the north and pave the way for Nilfgaardian conquest. However, the situation became complicated by factors the Kingslayers had not anticipated. A mysterious organization known as the Lodge of Sorceresses, powerful magic users pursuing their own political agenda, had its own plans for the North's future. The Lodge worked to manipulate events to their advantage, sometimes cooperating with the Kingslayers' efforts and sometimes opposing them. Meanwhile, Geralt of Rivia, the most famous Witcher of the age, became involved in investigating the assassinations. The Lodge members used magic to disguise one of their own, an assassin named Aukes, making him appear to be Geralt. This created a false trail, suggesting that the Wolf School, was involved in the regicides. The real Aux, the Viper Witcher, worked alongside his brothers to eliminate their next target, King Foltest of Temeria. Foltest was perhaps the most powerful monarch in the north, a skilled military leader whose kingdom formed the backbone of northern resistance to Nilfgaard. His elimination would be the Kingslayers' greatest achievement and their most brazen act. In 1271, Letho successfully assassinated Foltest, again throwing a major kingdom into chaos. But success came with a price. Geralt of Rivia, who had been serving as Foltest's bodyguard, witnessed the assassination. The Wolf Witcher pursued the Kingslayers, determined to bring them to justice. Other forces also turned their attention to hunting the Viper assassins. The sorceresses of the Lodge, the intelligence services of various kingdoms, bounty hunters seeking the massive rewards offered for the Kingslayers' capture. All of them pursued Letho and his brothers across the continent. Orcus and Seret were eventually captured or killed, depending on which sources one believes. Some accounts claim they died fighting, preferring death to capture. Others suggest they were taken alive and executed after torture extracted information about their mission and their imperial masters. The details remain murky, obscured by political manipulation and conflicting reports. What is certain is that both Vipers were dead by 1272, leaving Letho as the sole survivor of the Kingslayers. Letho hunted across the continent, eventually crossed paths with Geralt of Rivia. The two witches, representing different schools and opposing sides of a political conflict, formed an unlikely temporary alliance. Letho explained his motivations to Geralt, describing the Emperor's promise to rebuild the Viper School and his desperate desire to save his dying brotherhood. He defended his actions not as righteous, but as necessary, arguing that witches who served northern kings were no more neutral than vipers who served Nilfgaard. The conversation between them revealed the complexity of witcher existence in a political world where true neutrality was impossible and every choice had consequences. Geralt faced a choice: kill Letho and bring the Kingslayer to justice, or allow him to escape, acknowledging the impossible situation that had driven the Viper to commit regicide. Depending on Geralt's decision, Letho either died by the wolf's blade or disappeared into obscurity, his fate unknown. But regardless of Letho's personal fate, the school of the Viper's story had reached its conclusion. Emperor Emir var Emreis, despite his promises, never rebuilt the Viper School. Whether this was always his intention or whether circumstances changed his mind remains debatable. Some suggest Emir had never planned to honor his agreement, viewing the Vipers as expendable tools to be discarded once their usefulness ended. Others argue that the Emperor genuinely intended to rebuild the school, but was prevented by political considerations or resource constraints. The truth, like so much else about the Vipers, remains hidden in shadow and secrecy. The fortress of Gorthur Gvaed fell into ruin. The Viper School's extensive library on the Wild Hunt, centuries of accumulated knowledge about the spectral riders, was scattered or destroyed. The alchemical formulae that had made the Vipers master poisoners were lost. The mutation techniques that had created generations of imperial witches passed into memory. The School of the Viper, which had survived for hundreds of years in service to Nilfgaard, vanished as if it had never existed. The legacy of the Kingslayers cast a dark shadow over all witches. The northern kingdoms, already suspicious of witcher neutrality, now had proof that witches could be bought, that they could become political assassins who murdered kings. This revelation contributed to increased persecution of all witches, as rulers questioned whether any witcher could truly be trusted. The Wolf School, in particular, suffered from the false association with the regicides, as rumours persisted that Geralt of Rivia had been involved despite evidence to the contrary. Other Witcher schools viewed the Kingslayer's actions with horror and anger. The Vipers had confirmed every negative stereotype about witches, had validated every fear that rulers harboured about allowing mutant killers to operate freely. The damage to the Witcher profession's reputation was incalculable. Schools that had maintained good relations with local authorities suddenly found themselves viewed with suspicion. Contracts became harder to obtain. Witches faced increased hostility from common folk who saw them as potential kingslayers rather than monster hunters. Yet among some Vipers who survived into old age, separate from the kingslayers, there existed different perspectives. These elderly Vipers had left active service decades before the assassination plot, had perhaps never even known Letho and his brothers. They remembered the school's golden age, when Viper witches were respected imperial operatives who served with honor. They mourned the loss of Gortha Gvaed and its library, the destruction of knowledge that could never be recovered. To them, the Kingslayers represented not the inevitable conclusion of Viper philosophy, but a tragic aberration, desperate men driven to extreme measures by circumstances they could not control. The question of whether the Kingslayers were justified in their actions remains contentious. They broke fundamental Witcher principles by accepting political contracts and assassinating human rulers. They prioritized their school's survival over professional ethics. They knowingly created chaos that would result in thousands of deaths as kingdoms descended into civil war. By any conventional moral standard, their actions were indefensible, yet they faced an impossible choice: watch their school die, their traditions and knowledge vanishing forever, or commit terrible acts in hopes of preserving something that gave their lives meaning. No answer satisfies completely. No judgment feels adequate to the complexity of their situation. The School of the Viper's story serves as perhaps the clearest example of what happens when witches abandon neutrality and bind themselves to political masters. The Vipers gained resources, protection, and purpose through their service to Nilfgaard, but they also surrendered their independence, becoming tools to be used and discarded according to imperial convenience. When the Emperor no longer needed them, when the costs of rebuilding their school outweighed the benefits, they were abandoned despite centuries of loyal service. Their expertise in poison, infiltration, and assassination made them valuable operatives, but also marked them as too dangerous to preserve once their usefulness ended. The loss of the Viper School's Wild Hunt Library represents a tragedy that extends beyond the school itself. For centuries, the Vipers had accumulated knowledge about one of the continent's most persistent supernatural threats. That information, painstakingly gathered from countless sources, could have helped future generations understand and perhaps even defend against the Hunt. Its destruction meant that when the Hunt eventually returned in force during the events involving Ciri and the White Frost, defenders had to start from scratch, lacking information that might have saved lives. In the end, the School of the Viper demonstrated both the potential and the perils of specialization. Their focus on assassination and espionage made them incredibly effective at those tasks, but it also left them vulnerable when political circumstances changed. A school with broader focus, one that maintained independence and served multiple masters, might have survived where the Vipers fell. But such speculation serves little purpose. The Vipers chose their path, served their empire faithfully, and ultimately paid the price for that loyalty with extinction. Chapter 6. School of the Bear. First, to break away. The School of the Bear holds the distinction of being the first Witcher school to break away from the original order, founded by the aggressive and temperamental Arnagad after his violent altercation led to civil war at Morgrave Castle. The Bears established themselves in the harsh environment of the Amel Mountains, where they developed a reputation as tough, straightforward witchers who favored heavy armor and overwhelming force over subtlety and finesse. Their story is one of strength, isolation, betrayal, and ultimately tragic destruction at the hands of a fearful mob. Arnagad himself was a fascinating and complex figure, a witcher whose personality seemed at odds with the disciplined, emotionally controlled stereotype. Large and powerfully built even before his witcher mutations enhanced his strength further, Arnagad possessed a volatile temper that frequently got him into trouble. His dispute with fellow witcher Rhys over a chort hunting contract escalated into violence, with Arnagad nearly killing his brother Witcher in a fit of rage. This attack, a violation of the Order's most fundamental rules against harming fellow witchers, made Arnagad's expulsion inevitable. Rather than face judgment from his brothers, Arnagad chose to act preemptively. He returned to Morgrave Castle with a group of loyal followers, intending to seize control of the Order through force. The resulting battle was brutal and devastating, Witcher fighting Witcher in the halls that were meant to be their shared home. Many died on both sides before Arnagad and his surviving followers were finally driven out. The violence of this confrontation shattered any remaining unity within the Order, proving that the Brotherhood of Witchers was not strong enough to overcome personal grudges and power struggles. Arnagad and his followers, now outcasts hunted by their former brothers, fled north to the Amel Mountains. This harsh, remote region offered isolation and defensible positions, perfect for a group that needed to establish a new stronghold away from enemies. The Witchers discovered or built a fortress that they would call Han Kadoch, which means place of seagulls in Elder speech, a name that seems oddly poetic for the aggressive bears. Some sources suggest the fortress was actually named Ka Seren, meaning Starkeep, and confusion between Amel Mountain locations has muddled the historical record. The harsh mountain environment shaped the Bear School's philosophy and methods. Survival in the Amels required toughness, endurance, and the ability to withstand extreme cold and difficult terrain. The Bears adapted by emphasizing physical conditioning and resilience. Their training regimen was notoriously brutal, designed to weed out any weakness and create witchers who could endure any hardship. Students were subjected to extreme temperatures, forced to fight in heavy armor until exhaustion, and pushed beyond normal limits of endurance. The Bear School's combat style reflected both Arnagad's personality and their environment. They favored heavy armor, often wearing full plate that would encumber witches from other schools. Their weapons were similarly substantial: large two-handed swords, heavy axes, massive hammers. While other Witcher schools emphasized agility and precise strikes, the bears believed in simply overpowering their opponents. Why dance around a monster with quick cuts when you could simply smash through its defenses with overwhelming force? This straightforward approach extended to the bears' philosophy about the Witcher profession. They had no patience for the philosophical debates that occupied other schools. Witchers hunted monsters for payment. That was the job, nothing more, nothing less. They did not concern themselves with whether they were heroes or outcasts, whether they should serve humanity or remain neutral in human affairs. They took contracts, killed monsters, collected payment, and moved on. This simplicity appealed to certain personalities, attracting students who wanted clear purposes and straightforward methods. The Bear School's mutation process was adapted from the original Order's techniques, but modified to enhance physical strength and endurance even more than standard Witcher mutations. Bears were typically larger and more heavily muscled than Witchers from other schools, capable of wearing armor and wielding weapons that would be impractical for others. They could endure wounds that would incapacitate other Witchers, fighting through injuries that should have been debilitating. This enhanced durability came at a cost. Bears were generally less agile than other Witchers, slower to react to sudden threats, less effective at the acrobatic combat maneuvers that Witchers like Geralt of Rivia made famous. Arnagad ruled the Bear School with an iron fist, maintaining strict discipline and harsh standards. He tolerated no weakness, no hesitation, no questioning of his authority. Students who failed to meet his standards were expelled or died during training. Those who survived became Witchers, molded in Arnagad's image, tough, aggressive, and utterly committed to their profession. The school developed a strong sense of brotherhood among its members, bound by shared suffering during their brutal training and united in their defiance of the other schools that viewed them as renegades. The relationship between the Bear School and other Witcher schools remained complicated for decades after the split. Many Witchers viewed the Bears as traitors who had attacked their own brothers. The fact that Arnagad had started the violence at Morgreg was well known, and some Witchers refused to work alongside bears or share information with them. However, as decades passed and the original participants in the Morgreg battle died or retired, these grudges gradually faded. Younger generations of Witchers from all schools learned to coexist, if not cooperate, recognizing that monster hunting was difficult enough without turning every encounter into an opportunity for old feuds. The Bear School's isolation in the Amel Mountains provided both advantages and disadvantages. The remote location protected them from casual persecution and allowed them to train students without interference. However, it also made it difficult to recruit new candidates and obtain supplies. Bears venturing south to the more populated regions to take contracts often found themselves viewed with suspicion due to their school's reputation. The Bears' aggressive demeanor and imposing physical presence did little to endear them to nervous villagers already suspicious of Witchers in general. Within the Bear School, however, not everyone agreed with Arnagad's methods or philosophy. A faction developed that believed the school was too focused on brute force and not enough on subtlety and tactical thinking. This group studied alchemy intensively, particularly the creation and application of poisons. They argued that a witcher who could coat his blade with the right toxin could kill monsters with minimal risk. That cunning and preparation were more valuable than raw strength. This philosophical divide grew over time, with the alchemy-focused faction becoming increasingly distinct from the mainstream bear school. The split that created the School of the Viper occurred through careful planning, rather than violent confrontation. The faction that would become the Vipers departed quietly, taking with them specialized knowledge and alchemical supplies. They left behind no explanations or farewells, simply vanishing one night and making their way south to establish Gorta Gvaid in Nilfgaard. Arnegad reportedly flew into a rage when he discovered the desertion, but by then, the Vipers were long gone and beyond his reach. This loss of a significant portion of his school's membership wounded Arnegad deeply. He had already endured the trauma of being cast out from Morgreg, of seeing his vision of a new order rejected by his brothers. Now his own school was fracturing, proving that even his harsh discipline could not maintain unity among witches with fundamentally different philosophies. The departure of the Vipers may have contributed to Arnegad's increasingly harsh treatment of remaining students, as he sought to prevent further defections through fear and intimidation. The Bear School continued operating throughout the 11th and 12th centuries, training new generations of witches in the Amel Mountains. Bears became known across the continent for their distinctive appearance, large, heavily armored figures wielding massive weapons. Their medallions depicted a bear's head, often snarling or roaring. They developed specialized techniques for fighting large monsters, creatures whose size and strength made them particularly dangerous. Where a wolf witcher might dodge and strike at vulnerable points, a bear would simply meet the monster head-on, using superior strength to overpower it. The bears also developed a reputation for blunt honesty that bordered on rudeness. They had little patience for the political niceties that other witches sometimes employed when dealing with clients. If a village elder tried to cheat them on payment, bears would demand full compensation with threats of violence. If a noble attempted to manipulate them into taking sides in a local dispute, bears would refuse curtly and walk away. This directness earned them respect from some clients who appreciated dealing with straightforward professionals, but it also created conflicts that more diplomatic witches might have avoided. The Bear School's training included extensive survival skills beyond combat. Students learned to track prey through snow and ice, to construct shelter in extreme conditions, to find food and water in barren landscapes. These skills served them well during their travels, as bears often found themselves working in remote regions where villages were few and resources scarce. A bear witcher could survive for weeks in wilderness that would kill ordinary humans, subsisting on what they could hunt or forage while pursuing particularly dangerous monsters into their lairs. Despite their rough exterior and aggressive reputation, individual bear witches were capable of forming genuine friendships and showing compassion. The school's emphasis on toughness did not completely eliminate emotional capacity, and some bears developed close bonds with their clients or with individuals they encountered during their travels. These relationships revealed that beneath the hard exterior demanded by their training bears retained their humanity and capacity for connection. The bear school's approach to signs, the simple magical spells that all witches could cast, differed from other schools. While they learned all the standard signs like Igni, fire, Ard, force, and Quen, shield, bears tended to favor straightforward combat applications over subtle uses. They used Igni to set enemies aflame rather than for controlled burning. They used Ard to knock opponents down rather than for creating tactical advantages. The Quen sign, which created a protective shield, was perhaps their favorite, as it complemented their heavily armored, defensive fighting style. The beginning of the bear school's end came in the late 12th or early 13th century, when tragedy struck Herne Kadosh. The details vary depending on which historical account one consults, but the core story remains consistent. A mob of angry humans attacked the bear school's fortress. The reasons for this attack are debated. Some sources claim the bears had been conducting experiments on kidnapped peasant children, attempting to create new witches through forced mutations. Others suggest the attack was motivated by general fear and hatred of witches, with the bears simply being convenient targets. Still others propose that the bears had become involved in local politics, taking sides in disputes and making powerful enemies. What cannot be disputed is the ferocity of the assault and its devastating outcome. The mob, likely numbering in the hundreds or even thousands, besieged Herne Kadosh. They came with torches, weapons, and overwhelming numbers. The bears fought back, their superior combat skills allowing them to kill many attackers, but sheer numbers eventually overwhelmed the defenders. One by one, the bear witches fell. Some died, defending the gates. Others perished fighting in the halls and courtyards. A few attempted to escape through secret passages, but were hunted down and killed. By the time the mob's rage was spent, the school of the bear had been effectively destroyed. Herne Kadosh lay in ruins, its halls burned, its secrets scattered. The mutation masters who could create new bear witches were dead. The alchemists who had preserved centuries of alchemical knowledge perished in the flames. The training masters who had shaped generations of students fell defending their home. The bear school, which had survived for hundreds of years through strength and determination, ended in a single night of violence. Some bear witches survived, those who had been away from Herne Kadosh when the attack occurred. These survivors found themselves alone, the last representatives of their school. They continued their work as monster hunters, wearing their bear medallions with pride and defiance. But they could train no new students, could share their knowledge only verbally with whoever would listen. As these final bears died over the following decades, their school's techniques and traditions died with them. The loss of the bear school had ripple effects throughout the Witcher community. The other schools realized that if the bears, tough and powerful as they were, could be destroyed by an angry mob, then no Witcher school was truly safe. The attack on Herne Kadosh foreshadowed the broader pogrom against witches that would occur in the late 13th century, when angry mobs destroyed Kaer Morhen and killed most of the Wolf School students and trainers. The lesson was clear. Society's tolerance for witches was conditional and could vanish overnight, turning protectors into victims. The bear school's legacy lived on in the witches it had trained and the equipment it had developed. Bear school gear, particularly their distinctive heavy armor and large weapons, became prized by collectors and warriors, who could actually use such equipment. The school's combat techniques, emphasizing strength and endurance over agility, influenced training at other schools, even if they were not adopted wholesale. Some wolf and griffin witches incorporated elements of bear fighting style into their own approaches, creating hybrid techniques that combine the best aspects of multiple schools. Arnegad's ultimate fate remains unknown. Some accounts suggest he died defending Han Kadesh during the mob attack, fighting until his last breath, like the warrior he had always been. Others claim he was away from the fortress when it fell and survived to die years later, the last of the original bears, haunted by the knowledge that his school had been destroyed. Still other tales, likely apocryphal, suggest Arnegad survived into extreme old age and became a hermit in the mountains, a living relic of a bygone era. The School of the Bear story is one of strength without wisdom, of power without restraint. Arnegad's violent temperament, which led him to attack Rhys and start the civil war at Morgreg, set his school on a path that would ultimately lead to its destruction. The bear's aggressive demeanor and refusal to engage in diplomatic niceties made them effective monster hunters, but also isolated them from potential allies. Their brutal training methods created tough witches, but also drove away those who might have provided balance and perspective. In the end, strength alone proved insufficient to ensure survival. Yet the bears also exemplified certain admirable qualities. Their loyalty to each other, forged in shared hardship, created genuine brotherhood. The refusal to compromise their principles, even when doing so might have been politically advantageous, demonstrated integrity. Their straightforward honesty, while sometimes abrasive, meant clients always knew where they stood. The bears were what they appeared to be: tough, professional monster hunters who did their job without pretension or false nobility. In a world full of deception and hidden agendas, that directness had value. Chapter 7. School of the Griffin. Keepers of knightly ideals. Among the Witcher schools, none held more tightly to the noble ideals of chivalry and honor than the School of the Griffin. Founded by Erland of Larvik in memory of his mentor, the Knight Griffin who had taught the original order about duty and valor, the Griffin School represented an attempt to preserve what was best about the Witcher profession. They believed witchers should be more than simple monster hunters working for coin. They should be protectors of the innocent, champions of justice, warriors who served a higher purpose than their own survival. This idealism would make them both respected and vulnerable in a world that had little use for heroes. The founding of the Griffin School occurred during the fracturing of the original order at Morgreg Castle. Erland of Larvik had been deeply influenced by Taliesin, Bledin Yorath Ayep Laulin, the knight-errant known as Griffin, who served as an instructor at Morgreg. Griffin taught more than just swordplay. He spoke to the young witchers about the meaning of their existence, about the responsibility that came with their enhanced abilities, about the importance of serving something greater than oneself. These lessons resonated profoundly with Erland, who had struggled with questions about his purpose since undergoing the mutations that made him a witcher. When the violence erupted at Morgreg, with Arnegad attacking Rhys and then attempting to seize control of the Order, Erland saw his worst fears realized. The brotherhood that was meant to unite all witchers had shattered into factions fighting each other. The ideals that Griffin had taught seemed forgotten in the chaos of Witcher fighting Witcher. Erland's own brother Rhys, the same Rhys whom Arnegad had nearly killed, lay gravely wounded. The order that had given Erland's life meaning was collapsing around him. Erland made a decision. If the order could not maintain the ideals it was meant to embody, then he would create something new that could. He gathered 13 close friends, witchers who shared his belief in Griffin's teachings and his desire to preserve the noble aspects of their profession. Together, this group of 14 witches departed Morgrake peacefully, without violence or theft, simply walking away from an institution they believed had failed its original purpose. They traveled east, seeking a new home where they could build something better. Their journey led them to Caer Seren, a fortress in the mountains that had once housed the mages who created the first witches. Alzur, Cosimo Malaspina, and Idaran of Ulivo had conducted some of their early experiments at this location before moving to Morgrake. The castle had been abandoned for decades, left to decay after the mages departed. But it was not truly empty. The spirits of failed experimental subjects, children who had died during the early mutation attempts, and the ghosts of witches who had perished during training haunted the halls. Erland and his companions faced a trial by fire upon entering Caer Seren. The spirits attacked them, manifestations of pain and rage from those who had suffered and died in service of the Witcher creation process. For days, the 14 witches battled these supernatural entities, using their training and their signs to combat incorporeal enemies. It was a harrowing experience that tested both their combat skills and their resolve. But eventually, through courage and determination, they destroyed or banished the spirits, cleansing Caer Seren of its dark past. Having claimed the fortress through trial of arms, Erland declared it the home of a new Witcher school. They would call themselves the School of the Griffin, honoring the knight who had taught them the meaning of duty. Their medallions would bear the image of a griffin, the legendary creature that combined the nobility of the eagle with the strength of the lion. They would dedicate themselves to upholding the ideals that Griffin had embodied, protecting the innocent, serving justice, and conducting themselves with honor in all things. The Griffin School's philosophy set it apart from other Witcher schools immediately. While other schools emphasized that witchers were professional monster hunters who worked for payment, the Griffins believed they had a moral obligation to help those in need regardless of compensation. They would take contracts from poor villages that could barely afford to pay, accepting whatever meager coin or goods the peasants could provide. They would hunt monsters, threatening innocent travelers, even when no formal contract existed. They viewed their mutations and training not as a means to earn a living, but as a calling to serve humanity. This idealism extended to how Griffins conducted themselves in society. They strove to be courteous and respectful in their interactions, avoiding the casual rudeness that characterized some other schools. They studied etiquette and social customs, making themselves presentable at noble courts where other witches would be seen as uncouth. They learned to read and write, studied history and philosophy, cultivated knowledge beyond simple monster identification. The Griffins wanted to be seen not as necessary evils or dangerous freaks, but as a knights-errant who happened to specialize in supernatural threats. The training at Caer Seren reflected these philosophical priorities. Combat instruction emphasized not just killing efficiently, but fighting honorably. Students learned to avoid using poisoned weapons or underhanded tactics to give opponents chances to surrender, to show mercy when appropriate. They studied the knightly virtues: courage, loyalty, honor, compassion, and humility. Physical training was rigorous, but not brutally punishing like the Bear School's methods. The Griffins believed that creating psychologically healthy witches was as important as creating physically capable ones. The Griffin School placed special emphasis on mastering witcher signs. While all witches could cast these simple spells, the Griffins developed advanced techniques that allowed for much more sophisticated applications. They could use Igni to create precise, controlled flames rather than simple, explosive bursts. They developed variants of art that could push in specific directions with carefully calibrated force. Their mastery of Erden, the trap sign, allowed them to create complex magical barriers and containment fields. The Griffins viewed signs as tools that required skill and study, not just instinctive combat applications. This emphasis on signs had practical advantages in monster hunting. Griffins could tackle creatures that would be extremely difficult for witches, relying primarily on swordplay. A griffin facing a particularly dangerous monster might spend time preparing elaborate sign-based traps and defenses before engaging, turning a potentially lethal confrontation into a manageable challenge. Their magical expertise also made them valuable for dealing with cursed locations or supernatural phenomena that could not simply be killed with a sword. The Griffin School's knightly bearing and impressive sign mastery earned them respect in many regions. Noble families sometimes retained griffins as court witches, positions of relative prestige where they would handle any supernatural threats to the nobleman's lands. The griffins' literacy and education made them suitable for such positions in ways that other witches often were not. A griffin could discuss philosophy with scholars, attend formal dinners without embarrassing himself, serve as an advisor on matters of supernatural law. This social acceptance represented a significant achievement for witches, who were typically viewed as social outcasts. However, the Griffin School's idealism also created challenges. Their willingness to work for little or no payment meant they often struggled financially. A Griffin Witcher might spend weeks tracking and killing a dangerous monster, only to be rewarded with a handful of copper coins and a sincere thank you from impoverished villagers. While this satisfied the Griffin's sense of moral duty, it left him without resources to purchase quality equipment or supplies. Some Griffins grew to resent their school's high-minded principles when those principles left them hungry and poorly equipped. The school's emphasis on honor and mercy also put Griffins at risk in combat. While other witches would use every advantage to ensure survival, Griffins sometimes hesitated to employ ruthless tactics even when facing enemies who showed no such restraint. This moral consistency was admirable, but potentially fatal. More than a few Griffin witches died because they gave opponents chances to surrender that were exploited as opportunities for counterattack. The line between honorable combat and foolish mercy proved difficult to navigate. The relationship between the Griffin School and the scholarly community was particularly important. While other Witcher schools maintained some contact with mages and alchemists, purely for practical reasons related to mutations and potion making, the Griffins actively cultivated relationships with academic institutions. They donated monster parts to universities for study, shared their bestiary knowledge with scholars, and participated in academic discussions about the nature of magic and monsters. This cooperation benefited both sides, with scholars gaining access to rare materials and expertise, while Griffins gained knowledge and prestige. At Caer Seren, the Griffin School established an extensive library that became renowned among witches. They collected books on monster biology, magical theory, history, philosophy, and literature. Griffin students were required to read extensively as part of their training, ensuring they possessed both physical prowess and intellectual depth. This library represented one of the most valuable repositories of knowledge in the Witcher world, surpassed perhaps only by the Viper School's specialized collection on the Wild Hunt. The Griffin School's openness and idealism, however, would ultimately contribute to its downfall. In the late 12th or early 13th century, jealous mages launched an attack on Caer Seren. The exact motivations for this assault remain debated. Some sources suggest the mages resented the Griffins' growing prestige and feared that witches were becoming too respected and educated, potentially threatening the mages' own position in society. Others propose that specific individuals coveted the Griffin School's library, seeking to claim its accumulated knowledge for themselves. Still others suggest the attack was motivated by simple prejudice, mages who viewed witches as abominations that should not be attempting to educate themselves or elevate their social status. The mages attacked with overwhelming magical force, unleashing destructive spells against Caer Seren's walls and defenders. The Griffins fought back using their advanced sign techniques, but signs were ultimately no match for the raw power that trained sorcerers could bring to bear. The battle was fierce, but brief. The mages breached the fortress, killed many of the Griffin witches within, and set fire to the buildings. The library, that precious collection of knowledge accumulated over generations, burned. Irreplaceable texts turned to ash. Centuries of scholarly work vanished in a single night of flames. Some Griffin witches survived. Those who were away from Caer Seren taking contracts when the attack occurred. These survivors found themselves homeless, their school destroyed, their brothers dead, their life's work reduced to ruins. The loss of the library was particularly devastating. Without access to their collected knowledge, Griffin witches could not train new students as effectively. The mutation masters and their carefully preserved formulas were gone. The academic connections that had given the Griffins their unique character were severed. The surviving Griffins scattered across the continent, continuing their work as individual monster hunters. They maintained their dedication to the ideals Erland had established, helping people regardless of payment and conducting themselves honorably. But without a central school to train new generations, the Griffin witches became fewer with each passing year. By the time of the Witcher Saga's main events in the 13th century, Griffins were extremely rare, possibly extinct. The last confirmed Griffin witches died decades before Geralt of Rivia's adventures, taking with them the final remnants of their school's noble traditions. The loss of the Griffin School represented the destruction of an ideal. Of all the Witcher schools, the Griffins had come closest to achieving true respectability, to being viewed as heroes rather than necessary evils. They had proven that witches could be educated cultured, honorable warriors who served humanity from genuine altruism rather than mercenary pragmatism. Their destruction by jealous mages demonstrated that society ultimately preferred witches to remain marginalized and low status, that any attempt to elevate themselves would be met with violence. The Griffin School's legacy survived in the equipment and techniques they had developed. Griffin School gear, combining excellent protective capabilities with relatively light weight, became prized by witches from other schools. The advanced sign techniques that the Griffins had pioneered were studied and adapted by witches who recognized their practical value. The philosophical emphasis on serving humanity rather than simply taking contracts influenced some witches, particularly those who had encountered griffins and been impressed by their dedication and integrity. In the ruins of Caer Seren, among the burned remnants of the library and the scattered bones of fallen griffins, one can still sense the tragedy of what was lost. The school of the Griffin represented hope that witches could be more than monsters hunting monsters, that they could embody genuine heroism and nobility. Its destruction proved that such hope was, in the end, futile. Society would tolerate witches as necessary tools, but would not permit them to become anything greater. The Griffins learned this lesson too late and paid for their idealism with extinction. Chapter 8: School of the Manticore. Desert nomads. Far to the south, beyond the northern kingdoms, and even beyond the Nilfgaardian Empire, in the distant realm of Zerrikania, another Witcher school pursued its unique path. The School of the Manticore adapted to the harsh desert environment and exotic dangers of the south, developing techniques and philosophies that reflected their isolation from the northern Witcher traditions. They were traders as much as hunters, alchemists as much as warriors, and their story demonstrates how the Witcher concept evolved when transplanted to radically different environments. The origins of the School of the Manticore are shrouded in mystery, with conflicting accounts making it difficult to establish definitive facts. Some sources suggest the school was founded by witchers who left Morgreg during the general fracturing of the Order, traveling south rather than establishing themselves in the northern kingdoms. Others claim the Manticore school split off from another school, possibly the Bear or even the Cat, with the founders seeking to escape conflicts and start fresh in distant lands. The truth, lost to the desert winds and the passage of centuries, may never be fully known. What is known is that by the 11th century, a fully functional Witcher school operated in Zerrikania, having adapted completely to the southern environment and culture. They called themselves the School of the Manticore, adopting as their symbol the legendary creature that combined human, lion, and scorpion elements. The Manticore was a perfect emblem for their school, deadly, exotic, and capable of killing with both obvious and hidden weapons. Their medallions depicted this creature, marking them as distinct from the wolves, cats, bears, griffins, and vipers of the north. Zerrikania itself was vastly different from the northern kingdoms. The land was primarily desert, with scattered oases and mountain ranges, providing the only relief from endless sand. The climate was brutally hot during the day and surprisingly cold at night. The culture emphasized trade and commerce, with merchants and caravans forming the backbone of society. Warriors were prized, but expected to be sophisticated and educated rather than brutish. Women held positions of power unusual in the north, with warrior women called Zerrikanians being particularly renowned. Magic was practiced differently, with alchemical traditions distinct from northern spellcasting. The Manticore school adapted to this environment in every aspect of their operation. Rather than establishing a single permanent fortress like other schools, the Manticores operated from multiple bases scattered throughout Zerrikania. Some of these were traditional strongholds built into mountain ranges or oases. Others were mobile camps that could be relocated as circumstances required. This dispersed approach reflected both the nomadic nature of Zerrikanian culture and practical security concerns about maintaining a single vulnerable headquarters. The monsters of the south differed significantly from northern creatures, requiring the manticores to develop specialized knowledge and techniques. While northern witches dealt with drowners, neckers, and griffins, the manticores hunted creatures adapted to desert environments. Giant scorpions, sand-dwelling worms, venomous serpents of unusual size, and sphinxes that posed riddles to travelers all fell under the manticore's expertise. They also developed methods for dealing with jinn and other elemental spirits that were more common in the south than in the north. The Manticore school's greatest specialization was alchemy. The deserts and mountains of Zerrikania contained plants, minerals, and animal parts unavailable in the north, providing unique alchemical ingredients. The Manticores became masters at identifying these materials and understanding their properties. They developed potions, oils, and bombs using formulas that northern witches had never seen. Some of these concoctions were far more effective than northern equivalents, while others provided entirely new capabilities. This alchemical expertise made the manticores valuable as traders. They would venture north on occasion, traveling the long, dangerous routes through mountains and hostile territories to reach northern markets. There, they would sell exotic alchemical ingredients, rare monster parts, and specialized potions at premium prices. They would also purchase northern goods unavailable in Zerrikania, creating a two-way trade that benefited both regions. Some manticore witches became wealthy through this commerce, accumulating resources that allowed their school to thrive. The Manticore school's combat style reflected both their alchemical focus and the unique demands of desert hunting. They favored medium armor that provided protection without being so heavy that it became unbearable in extreme heat. Their weapons emphasized reach and precision, with specialized crossbows and throwing weapons being common. The manticores developed techniques for fighting while mounted on camels or horses, necessary skills for pursuing monsters across vast expanses of sand. They also trained extensively in fighting multiple opponents simultaneously, reflecting the fact that many desert monsters traveled in packs. The school's approach to witcher signs differed from northern traditions. While they learned all the standard signs, the manticores developed their own variants adapted to desert conditions. Their version of Igni was particularly potent, capable of creating intense heat that could literally melt sand into glass. They developed specialized applications of Ard useful for creating sandstorms or clearing away sand to reveal buried creatures. Their Quen sign incorporated elements that protected against heat and sunburn, not just physical damage. The manticore mutation process was adapted from whatever formulas the school's founders brought from the north, but modified using Zerrikanian alchemical knowledge. Manticore witches gained enhanced resistance to heat and dehydration beyond what other witches possessed, crucial adaptations for operating in desert environments. They also developed unusual resistance to venoms and toxins, likely due to regular exposure to the unique poisons found in southern creatures. Some accounts suggest manticore witches had enhanced sense of smell compared to other schools, useful for tracking prey through desert terrain where visual tracking was difficult. The relationship between the Manticore school and Zerrikanian society was complex. Unlike northern witches who faced constant discrimination and persecution, the Manticores were generally respected as skilled professionals. Zerrikanian culture valued expertise and competence above social status or birth, and witches who could reliably eliminate dangerous creatures were appreciated accordingly. However, the Manticores were still seen as outsiders, foreign warriors whose origins lay in distant lands and whose mutations marked them as fundamentally different from normal humans. The Manticore school accepted students from diverse backgrounds, including Zerrikanians themselves, which helped integrate them into local society. However, the school never forgot its northern origins entirely. They maintained some traditions from the original order, taught northern fighting techniques alongside Zerrikanian methods, and preserved knowledge about northern monsters, even though such creatures were rarely encountered in the south. This cultural hybridity made the Manticores unique, warriors who existed between two worlds without fully belonging to either. The school's training regimen emphasized versatility and adaptability. Students learned not just combat and monster hunting, but also trade skills, languages, cultural knowledge about various regions, and survival techniques for multiple types of terrain. A fully trained Manticore witcher could operate effectively in northern forests, southern deserts, mountain ranges, or coastal regions. They could negotiate trade deals, gather intelligence, serve as guides through dangerous territory, or work as bodyguards when monster hunting contracts were scarce. This flexibility ensured steady income and employment, even when monster populations declined. The Manticore school's attitude toward the Witcher's Code differed from northern schools. They had no qualms about taking sides in human conflicts when doing so served their interests. Manticore witches worked as mercenaries, spies, and even as military advisors to Zerrikanian queens and merchant princes. They viewed strict neutrality as a northern affectation that served no practical purpose. In their view, witches should use their abilities to advance their own interests and those of their school, whether that meant hunting monsters or serving in other capacities. This pragmatic philosophy extended to their approach to contracts. While they would hunt monsters for payment like any other witches, the Manticores also accepted work that northern witches would refuse. They would deal with bandits, investigate crimes, recover stolen goods, or handle delicate diplomatic situations. Their enhanced abilities and mutations made them effective at virtually any task requiring skill and danger, so why limit themselves to only monster hunting? This flexibility ensured the school's economic stability and made individual Manticore witches wealthy compared to their northern counterparts. The decline of the Manticore school occurred gradually, rather than through a single, catastrophic event. As the centuries passed, monster populations in Zerrikania diminished due to successful hunting and human expansion. the school's traditional services became less necessary. Simultaneously, political changes in Zerrikania created instability that made it difficult for foreign warriors, even respected ones like the Manticores, to operate freely. Some sources suggest conflicts with local mage guilds contributed to the school's problems, though details remain scarce. By the 13th century, the School of the Manticore had effectively ceased to exist as an organized institution. The various bases and camps were abandoned or repurposed. The mutation masters died without training replacements. The accumulated alchemical knowledge was scattered, with individual witches taking what they could carry when they departed. Some Manticore witches remained in Zerrikania, continuing their work as individual hunters and traders. Others ventured north, seeking opportunities in the kingdoms that their school's founders had left centuries earlier. These northern traveling manticores brought with them exotic knowledge and capabilities that fascinated other witches. They introduced southern alchemical techniques to northern schools, shared information about desert monsters, and demonstrated fighting styles that northern witches had never seen. A few manticore witches became famous in the north for their unusual skills and exotic backgrounds, but they also faced challenges, as northern society was even more suspicious of foreigners than of their own native witches. The legacy of the Manticore School lives on in the alchemical knowledge they developed and the trade routes they established. Some of the most effective witcher potions and oils use formulas originally developed by Manticore alchemists. The exotic ingredients they introduced to northern markets became prized by alchemists and witches alike. The school's approach to diversifying income beyond simple monster hunting influenced other schools, particularly during the later centuries when monster populations declined and traditional contracts became scarce. The School of the Manticore demonstrated that the Witcher concept could be successfully adapted to radically different environments and cultures. While the northern schools struggled with persecution and marginalization, the Manticores found acceptance and prosperity in the south. Their pragmatic philosophy and willingness to diversify their services ensured economic stability that eluded more traditional schools. Yet even this success could not prevent their eventual decline, proving that all Witcher schools faced similar fundamental challenges regardless of location or approach. In the end, the Manticores represent a road not taken by northern witches. If schools like the Wolf or Griffin had adopted the Manticore approach, diversifying their services and actively cultivating relationships with political powers, they might have avoided some of the persecution that eventually destroyed or crippled them. But such speculation ignores the cultural context that made the Manticore approach successful in Zerrikania, but potentially disastrous in the north. The same flexibility that served the Manticores well in the south might have led northern witches into political entanglements that ended even more badly than historical events did. Chapter 9. School of the Crane, Hunters of Sea and Sky. Among the most mysterious and poorly documented witcher schools was the School of the Crane, about which very little reliable information survives. What we know comes from fragmentary references in historical documents, passing mentions in the journals of other witchers, and archaeological evidence from a few locations associated with the school. The Cranes represent the ultimate lost school, so thoroughly erased from history that even confirming their existence requires piecing together hints and speculation. Yet the evidence suggests they were real, that they developed unique specializations, and that they met an unfortunate end that left barely a trace of their passing. The School of the Crane may have been founded during the same general period as other schools, when the original order at Morgreg fractured and various factions left to establish their own traditions. However, some accounts suggest a later origin, with the Cranes splitting off from an already established school, possibly the griffin given both schools use of winged creatures as symbols. The crane, a bird associated with wisdom, vigilance, and grace in many cultures, would have been an appropriate emblem for witches who specialized in particular types of hunting. The evidence suggests that the School of the Crane specialized in hunting flying creatures and aquatic monsters, the types of creatures that other witcher schools often struggled to combat effectively. Flying monsters like harpies, griffins, wyverns, and cockatrices presented unique challenges to ground-bound witchers. How do you engage an enemy that can attack from above and retreat to the sky when threatened? Traditional witcher tactics, built around sword combat and ground-based positioning, proved less effective against aerial threats. The Cranes developed specialized techniques to address these challenges. Similarly, aquatic monsters like drowners, water hags, and various lake and river creatures posed difficulties for witchers trained primarily for land-based combat. Fighting in water neutralized many of the advantages that witcher mutations provided, as enhanced strength and speed mattered less when struggling against currents and unable to breathe. The Cranes apparently developed methods for dealing with water-dwelling threats that other schools lacked. Archaeological evidence from a location tentatively identified as a Crane School stronghold reveals some intriguing details about their methods. The fortress, built on a coastal cliff overlooking the sea, featured unusual architectural elements, including high observation towers, enclosed areas that may have been aviaries for training purposes, and water-filled chambers that could have served as aquatic training facilities. Equipment found at the site includes specialized crossbows with unusual mechanisms, possibly designed for shooting flying targets, and what appear to be harpoons or spears for underwater combat. The Crane School's combat style, based on the limited information available, emphasized ranged combat more than other schools. While all witchers trained with crossbows, the Cranes apparently made ranged weapons a primary focus rather than a supplement to swordplay. They developed specialized bolts for different types of flying creatures, understanding that a bolt designed to penetrate a harpy's body might be ineffective against a griffin's thicker hide. They trained extensively in leading moving targets, compensating for wind and making rapid follow-up shots. For aquatic combat, the Cranes developed techniques using specialized weapons, effective underwater. Standard swords were nearly useless when submerged, as water resistance made swinging motions ineffective. Instead, the Cranes favored slender thrusting blades and compact spears that could move cleanly through the weight of water. They were said to train in deep, flooded chambers, learning to control their breath, their buoyancy, and their fear. A crane witcher could remain motionless beneath the surface for minutes, patient as the hunt demanded, waiting for the shadow of a creature to pass overhead before striking upward with precision born of endless repetition. It is said that their mutations reflected this adaptation. The few surviving texts hint at pupils capable of adjusting to sudden light shifts and lungs able to store and regulate air more efficiently. Some even whispered that their hearts beat slower than other witches, a trait that granted them calm control under pressure, but came with a strange stillness that unnerved ordinary men. The cranes were known to speak softly, move quietly, and breathe like meditating monks rather than killers. But their art was not just one of combat. It was one of philosophy. The crane itself was a symbol of balance between elements, air and water, grace and patience. The school taught that a witcher should not fight against nature's rhythm, but move with it, finding stillness in chaos and harmony in the act of the hunt. Their meditative discipline bordered on the spiritual, and travelers sometimes mistook them for hermits rather than slayers. They could stand unmoving for hours by a lakeshore, watching ripples in the current, or stare skyward for entire afternoons, following the dance of gulls and swallows against the clouds. Their coastal fortress, built into a high cliff above the sea, became a place of quiet ritual. Apprentices began each dawn with meditation overlooking the waves. The rhythm of the tide was their clock, the sound of gulls their hymn. At sunset, they practiced archery on the open parapets, firing into targets tossed from the cliffs, perfecting the art of leading a moving mark through the air. Within the keep, pools and channels filled with seawater allowed underwater drills by torchlight, the flames flickering across the rippling surface as they trained below. Yet the sea that sustained them would one day betray them. Accounts differ on the cause, but all agree that the crane's end came swiftly. Some say a storm of unnatural ferocity struck the coast, waves higher than towers crashing against their walls until stone gave way and the fortress fell into the hungry sea. Others claim the cranes angered something older, something that stirred beneath the deep waters they had so long studied. The story tells of a hunt gone wrong, a creature vast as a cathedral, drawn from the abyss by harpoons and fire, pulling the witches' ships down into blackness and dragging their fortress after them as if by invisible chains. When the storm cleared, the sea was calm again. Only fragments of masonry remained where the stronghold had stood. Fishermen later spoke of strange lights far below the surface, pale, flickering shapes that moved like men walking in slow motion. Some swore they saw figures in armor among the reefs, eyes glowing faintly through the depths, forever patrolling their drowned halls. Whether these were spirits, illusions, or the last mutated remnants of the cranes themselves, no one could say. And so the school of the crane passed into legend, their name whispered only by sailors and those who hunt by moonlight near the shore. They were hunters of sea and sky, masters of stillness and motion, balance and patience. Their fortress sleeps now beneath the waves, its halls filled with the endless song of the tide. But on certain nights, when the moon is full and the wind is calm, travelers claim to hear the sound of distant crossbows loosing bolts into the dark, and the cry of seabirds circling a place where no land remains. Thus ended the school of the crane, forgotten by history, but remembered by the waters that claimed them. Their legacy lingers, not in books or monuments, but in the whisper of waves against the cliffs, and in the timeless flight of the bird that bore their name. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey through the forgotten paths of the Witcher world. through ruins long silent, and orders whose names have faded into legend. If you found peace in these tales of the lost Witcher schools, their rise, their fall, and their lingering echoes in the mists of time, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tranquil lore journeys across the continent. Until next time, may your road be safe, your fire warm, and your dreams free of monsters.